And finally, the people behind the Mindful CIO manifesto and community. So we have our champions who have endorsed the manifesto and our contributors. And of course, I am extremely honored, delighted, feeling super privileged to have Angela Coble today with us, who is our guest speaker. So I'll stop sharing the screen so I can actually see Angela better. I only have one screen. I'm at Monash today, not in my usual setup. So welcome Ange to the stage shortly, but I would like to read her bio. So Angela Coble is an executive leader, board member, and internationally published author with more than 20 years experience in leadership across industries and is recognized as a thought leader in technology. Ange has an MBA and a Bachelor of Business from USQ, Southern Queensland University. She gained her certification as an Information Security Manager from ISACA and is also qualified in Information Security Risk Management at the SUMS Institute. Ange is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors as well, and has extended her specialty in leadership and digital transformation, studying at international faculties with MIT and Oxford. In 2020, she was announced as number 2 in Australia's top 50 CIOs. For the 3rd year, Ange made this prestigious list. She contributes her volunteer time towards advancing women in STEM. And in 2019, she embarked on her doctorate by research on leadership in technology. Ange has held various advisory board positions. It's one of our dear champions and is currently on the University of Technology Sydney Advisory Board, representing technology education requirements for the future. Warm welcome, Ange. Such a treat to have you here.
Thank you. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Anyone would think I have nothing else to do with my time but read and study. But nonetheless, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I was smiling because, yeah, it's such a classical high achiever profile, isn't it? Okay, so I'd like to start, Angie. So my plan is to start with some questions, the typical questions we ask, our guests, and then we go into a more conversational mode, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So in terms of your extraordinary bio and career, so you have a very impressive, diverse background, right? You started as network administrator, in the year 2K days, and now you're number 2 CIO in Australia. You have these diverse exposure to business, being able to, speak and understand and influence boards. But you also have that technical background, in certification security space. From previous interviews that I've joined you, seen you speaking, I know that some of your strengths are curiosity, if I may say. You have a really curious mind, a big asker, according to your own words, love for learning, and highly committed, of course, to learning and growth. You also very devoted to ethical artificial intelligence, or a big believer that ethics in tech is important, servant leadership, and so on. So this is a little bit of extra context for everyone about Ange. There's a little bit of context before I get to the question. So I'd love to hear from you, Ange, a little bit of a reflection on your career from your strengths point of view, because I imagine we have some CIOs here with us tonight, and some of them are first-time CIOs or aspiring CIOs, CTOs. So it'd be good to hear from you from a strengths perspective. What's your reflection on your career, and giving all these milestones and all these achievements that are so impressive?
Oh, thank you. That's very lovely of you to such a very humble preamble, actually. But I have to say, I smile because every time the academia gets mentioned, I just reflect on how your children tend to ground you and bring you back to the real world. So at one point they realized that I've never left school. So be it through, you know, high school days and the like, and then I left and I decided I'd do a bit of accounting. So I went to night school for a little while, and then I thought, no, I don't really like accounting. So I went off and did a little bit of financial planning. I thought, no, I don't like that either. So then I started doing my undergrad. Fast forward 20 odd extra years or so, and I'm still at university. So their comment to me is, clearly you're a slow learner, Mum. And they're now like 23, 21 and 20. So it's like they've had their whole life. I have literally been either in the room with them while they're falling asleep beside me doing my assignments or the like late at night, or they've been subjected to my Dr. Phil moments, they call them, around the dinner table as they got older about something that I might have researched or read. So my foray into technology was actually very bizarre. I'd always wanted to be a lawyer. So I left school and deferred for 12 months, and then all of a sudden I'm working in an admin role around about Y2K. So during that blip of time, I you know, was married, bought a house, had 2 children. So it was kind of that quick process whilst I was starting to kind of find my feet as to what I wanted to do. So I just started in admin. And as it turned out, this Y2K thing was kind of around, and they said, oh, we have no one who knows tech. And they looked at me and I went, and you think I do? I said, all right, well, I'll give it a go. What's the worst thing that happened? I melt all the records that we currently have on the system. But hey, at that point, I wasn't working in healthcare. So it was all right. I can deal with a few missed records if that's going to be the case. Anyway, that all went fine. So then I left there, and that was in agriculture, and I went across to banking. And in banking, again, started kind of on the front line, so as a teller, and then ended up going right through to being their operating officer. So that was kind of a 5-year accelerated experience, which had me, again, being the person who was overseeing all the technology. So I wasn't the technologist as such, but I was doing the technology. And that's when I first had a taste of security, because I had to take what was way back then double DES encryption in our ATM network to triple DES. And so kind of got a feel for what this looked like. And at that point, I was doing my Bachelor of Business. So there was still no technology anywhere, you know, in amongst it all. Fast forward, I went to utilities, and in utilities, I was working as a business performance and innovation lead. And with that came being out in the field with people who were basically the same age as my father at the time, who had chosen to do a field-based role because they didn't want to be sitting behind a desk or using the pieces of technology which they were told they had to actually use. So I ended up getting my white card, my steel boots, my high vis and hat, and went and slung conductor with all of them. So I literally rode with them in the truck and learned how to do poles and wires, because that was the business I was in. So again, I was overseeing tech, but still not actually immersed in it. Fast forward to J&J. So I left the utilities environment and came into J&J, and I was only in J&J for about 6 months when we needed to do a new healthcare compliance system. And they kind of went, well, Ange, you've done a bit of tech. How about you own it? And so I was in the business. So all the way through, I'd been on the commercial side of the organizations, not necessarily on the technology side. And so after 12 months, I declared to all and sundry that would listen, I actually want to immerse myself in tech. Well, the response I got was, why are you going to the dark side? Like, you've clearly got, you know, you're happy where you are, your career's going really well. You know, this thing called tech just doesn't seem to, it's kind of this black hole. And I went, well, what better way to understand it than to actually immerse yourself in it? So a very serendipitous meeting with our new global Chief Information Security Officer. And I found myself in the security team leading the engineers globally, and getting my certification. So that was my first foray into technology as an immersive career decision. And I decided cybersecurity was probably the place to be. It was definitely different, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with people who had, what would I say, in the field experience defending certain assets because they were part of national security teams. So it was very interesting to be involved in that environment and learn a lot about the tech industry. And then, you know, through the course of all of that, I received my technology certifications. From a credibility perspective is why I went after those whilst I was in that team. Got offered the opportunity to apply for the in-market CIO role, and 8 years later, here I am. And I've loved every minute of it. And it has been a different role every 12 months. And about 3 years ago, at the end of 2019, maybe the start of 2019, I was offered the opportunity to go on the executive board for J&J. And honestly, that was as a result of doing, I have no doubt, my AICD accreditation, because it showed that I had the ambidextrous skills to be able to lead a technology organization, understand the commercial risk and growth levers, whilst at the same time being able to sit on a board and make the strategy, governance and risk decisions for the organization. So it was a beautiful complement to what has been a very immersive journey thus far. So that's my tech career.
Thanks, Ange. And a couple of rabbit holes there that I would love to go in. But I'm conscious of time, and there are other things that I would like to cover. So thanks so much for sharing. If we shift gears and look into the theme for this evening, which is declaration number 7 of the Mindful CIO Manifesto, which is we discourage long working days. I remember in a conversation with Ian, you mentioned something that I found was very innovative, at the least, that you have booked meetings with people in your team, and then you would cancel to create space in the agenda to, to say, in other words, guys, no, go home, close for the day, and take some time off. You also got your team through resilience training way before the pandemic, and you are, according to some of the findings, if I haven't misunderstood, of your research, you really see the role of tech leaders as a bit of a wellness coach in a way, and you're a big believer of servant leadership. So around that declaration, we discourage long working days. What are the other tips or strategies or things that you do to ensure that your team, it's working reasonable hours? And we understand that from time to time long working days are required, due to deadlines, and that's the reality of the industry. But what are your thoughts around that declaration, that topic?
It is, so there's 2 that really stood out for me, and it was 6 and 7. So it was the respect the healthy boundaries and we discourage long working days, because to me that has been a bit of an anchor for me throughout my career. And when you're looking to have a life well lived and fulfilled, it's not just about the time you devote to what is the working hours. And so when you understand very early on that you need to wrap an experience around an individual, which then engages them in the work that we do, it's a very different approach. So the research that I started was specifically around the leadership requirements in the future for technologists. So what did that look like? And I was quite focused on, once I understood that from an empirical level or a clinical level, so through the research, I would then apply that to, would that then make a difference with the gender gap? What was interesting as I went through the process of collecting the primary data was that all this resilience was coming out, which I'd obviously witnessed well before the pandemic anyway, because that was, to your point, I'd already started putting the tech team around me through resilience training. So they understood that. We had nice little micro habits that we'd hold each other accountable to around the recharge mechanisms. We would use a point system to make sure that we got 100 points of recharge every week. So we actually gamified in our own way our own wellness and resilience. And I didn't think too much of it, other than I knew that as a team who were overachievers and who would drop everything to ensure, including their own lives, to ensure that the technology was operating at its best, that I needed to provide them with a toolkit and also the education and awareness around why it was so important to look after self and have this wellness approach. So we hit the last couple of years, and their elasticity in the team has been phenomenal. They have been able to ring fence their day, take time out, put walking sessions in. That funny little note that you made, the comment you made around me putting time in their diaries, because I could see their diaries extending, and I thought, fine, I'm going to be your last meeting, or I'm going to be your middle meeting, and I know that you'll prioritize it because it's with their leader. And so then just before it, sometimes even I'd jump on and say, hey, you got yourself a cup of tea today? No, not yet. So how are you feeling? Yeah, good. All right, take 5. We'll talk tomorrow. Meeting over, all done. You've now got 55 minutes back in your day. Do whatever you like. So the research actually, when I started to put my own lived experience with what was coming through in the data, it pointed to this, not just this career coach that we all need to embrace as leaders, to provide that experience around our talent, but also this wellness approach, which is very different to self-care, which is very different to career coaching, and it's an absolute different skill set. So that was what came out, and it's been interesting as we've continued to explore it as a team. Even today, we were pressure testing our team charter, and our team charter is around how we work, how we show up, what are our values, what type of worker are we? Are we fully remote? Are we hybrid? What is our preference? So that shared view of our team, so that we understand each other, which builds this level of bond amongst all of them, because you're actually sharing your innermost value and the way in which you'd like to operate. And funnily enough, I've seen each person within the team become wellness coaches in themselves, looking after everybody else, including me.
Wonderful, full circle. So, question that I have just in mind, and I'm putting myself on the shoes of the new CIOs, some who might be overwhelmed and struggling to juggle stakeholders, expectations, as well, comparing priorities with even having the heart, in the best intentions. Sometimes it can be a struggle to juggle that. So would you have any tips, advice, thoughts, or reflectors around juggling the genuine desire to look after your team, and in the same time being overwhelmed, managing the workload, and struggling with that balance, especially for new CIOs? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I will share. So there's a level of vulnerability, transparency, and letting people in, which you just need to embrace, because you can't be everything to everyone, and you need to be able to share your experience. And I'll give you a couple of examples of my early days. I remember, leaving a highly successful, wonderfully engaged, potentially not emancipated yet, because that's that next level, if you think about the levels of engagement, empowerment, and then the emancipated team. But certainly I was loving every moment of my security days, and I stepped into this role with these massive aspirations. I was going to be the transformational CIO. I didn't need to focus on hygiene because everything looked pretty good from the outside in. I was pretty comfortable. I had said to my managing director at the time, I'm going to step in, we'll reframe our CRM. I've got this idea about wearables in health. We'll engage partners, and really start to push the boundaries on a few things. I remember stepping in, and it was around about my 40th birthday. So we decided to take a week, go off the grid for my 40th. So I got the job, had about a month or so of getting to know everyone, and sort of pressure testing what was going on. And then I went away for a week. I came back and my phone, when I switched it on, there was like message after message after message. We had outages, we had downtime. So like the honeymoon period lasted 4 weeks, including 1 week of solace in a place where they couldn't get me. And then it was full on. And I remember at times being so overwhelmed that I didn't know whether I was coming home to laugh into my glass of wine because this is hysterical and I can't believe that this is actually what it's like, to wanting to cry into my glass of wine because I can't believe this is what it's like. So it was just an intense period when I stepped in. And I actually, I felt like for that first probably 6 to 12 weeks that I was just in this mess and chaos. And I literally pulled myself out and I went, this is not the leader. This is not me. I'm being so reactive to the situation. I need to step back and just really consider what's actually happening. And from basically that moment, say the outages that I was dealing with, I wasn't the one going as a technology leader in my market to present to my managing director the outage time and what was going on. I actually brought everyone that was responsible, from the engineer to the network administrator to the software analyst. They all came into that room with me. And I said, and you now have a voice. And so when the managing director asked the question, you're as invested in this as what I am, because this is a shared responsibility. I can defend you if I can defend you, but this is something that we all have to own up and we just need to fix it. And it took about 12 months. But what I found in that period, we gelled as a team to start off with, because we were, adversity tends to breed that to start off with. But we then also, they saw how important they were to the organization and how I was willing to be the leader that allowed them not only to be part of the solution, but actually own it as well. And so letting people in, and similarly the way that I would do it with my business partners, saying, I don't actually have all the answers. I'm really keen to co-create this. We're not going to, extend the working days just to try and fit more in, but really be open and transparent about where we're at that given point in time. And sometimes, a lot of times, until you practice it a bit, it's quite uncomfortable because you are being vulnerable with those that are actually impacting your career and your work life. But what's the alternative? You burn out, stress out, your team are not engaged and involved. Like I couldn't see it. And that first 6 to 12 weeks, I just could not imagine my next 8 years being like that. So that's my advice, I guess, with that story: the vulnerability, the transparency, the bringing people in with you to co-create the solution and engage with the problem or the issue just has seemed to work very well for me. And so far, so good.
Brilliant. That's gold. Thanks so much for generously sharing that, Ange. I think we have time for maybe a couple of questions before we close. So I think that's a good link to talk about self-care strategy. So I remember you saying that you try to avoid having back-to-back meetings whenever you can, allow a little bit of time to clear your head and get a bit of sunshine, listening to audiobooks and podcasts and walking, some of your key go-to, I think, self-care strategies. And I remember you talking about the food, the acronym. So would you like to comment, whatever comes to mind in terms of self-care strategies or routines or rituals you have?
Yeah, so again, interesting space, because I've just finished a book by Eve Rodsky called The Unicorn Space, and I've just learnt again a new definition and around what self-care means and what it actually isn't. And it talks about self-care as the way in which you would recover or restore, not necessarily the space where you're creative or you're thriving. And so it was interesting as I went through this book, it kind of challenged me a little bit on my own self-care habits, because I would have gone to everything that you said. I love reading. I love audiobooks. Clearly behind me, I've got books on various topics. I love learning and I love being in that space. I would have said that was self-care because that's where I get my energy from. it's actually my creativity, which is very different to self-care. So self-care for me has to be the walking every day, every single day. Like even today, raining in the Hunter Valley, and I don't know those on the call know the wine region of New South Wales. So that's where I actually live, and my core office is back in Sydney, which is a couple of hours away. And we've been up here for 6 years. And what I've learnt in that 6 years is that me connecting with nature, walking every day, grounds me so much, that allows me my own elasticity that I spoke about, where I can actually take on quite a bit and not feel overwhelmed. So it is really important. If I miss a couple of days because, I'm either not at home, or it's, I'm in Sydney and it's just not conducive to walking, I actually can feel the difference in myself. So I get back, I go for a walk, and I'm centered again. And for me, after the last probably week of just reacquainting myself with self-care principles and what they're not through this unicorn book, the walking every day has to be my best self-care ritual.
Okay, thanks, Ange. And what's coming to mind is the memory of you when you mentioned Hunter Valley, how your decision, it's a bit off topic, I hope you don't mind, but how you decided to, in some stage you decide, I'm buying a block of land, I'm moving to the Hunter Valley, and you on the decision, and you had a conversation, and you made it work. Putting your, family, core values, your anchors as a priority. So would you like to share a little bit? Because I think it's related to health boundaries and to self-care in a way, to be true to our values. Would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So it actually bodes well for 6 and today 7 around those we discourage long working days. So if you think about where I live in the Hunter Valley, and I'll get to the story about getting here, but if I did a normal commute, I would have to leave here at 5 a.m. in the morning to actually get to my office by 7:30. If I didn't then leave until 6 o'clock at night, I wouldn't get home until 8:30, 9 o'clock. Like, it's just not appropriate. Now, on the days where I decide to stay down, I stay down. But my preference is to actually make this work flexibly for me. So I actually get up, I have my usual self-care ritual. I get in the car at 8 and I head down on the days when I'm in the office. So I get there about 10 a.m. The days when I'm there are very proximity driven. So there's no MS Teams, Zoom meetings. It's all about the people that I'm there with. And then I jump back in the car at 4 and I'm home at 6. So that's a boundary that I've put around, and that's a work day that I've designed over 6 years ago to ensure that when I'm visible and in person, people get the most of me without me burning myself out at either end. Now, on the flip side, you said it nicely, some days are a bit longer. So say the next day, because I've had that great day, I might actually switch on at 6 in the morning while I'm, working with the US, and I might go through to 6, but I'm actually okay with that. So it's a 12-hour day, not back to back. I am getting up. I do walking meetings. Like I have that movement that's required. But to me, that's true flexibility in how we operate within boundaries and within those long working days, because you can see the balance that you get over time versus the balance that you get in one particular day. And that works well for me. And it might not work for others, but it works for me. But the decision to actually move up here, which was 6 years ago, probably a little bit, we moved up here 6 years ago. So the decision was 8 years ago. So think about how this coincides. I just got the CIO role, which is a Sydney-based position. And we happened to come to a wedding up in the Hunter Valley, went for a push bike ride, found this amazing block of land and went, you know what, we should buy it. Went through the process of buying it, and we thought that would be a nice place to retire to. That was kind of, the thinking. I found myself in and I don't know if anyone on the call knows Ben Zander. He wrote the book Art of the Possible and is actually, I think, the Boston Philharmonic conductor, like just an amazing man. And I had the pleasure of spending, along with 80 or so other amazing leaders, spending 3 hours with him in a room as he talked about the art of the possible. my husband and I had been grappling with. We had 3 kids going into high school. We knew we had to stay centered for them. We had a window of opportunity, probably when the first one hit year 10, to decide where we were going to live, which then would have committed us to Sydney for another like 6 or 7 years. Like we would have only just been leaving now because our baby finished high school only 12 months ago, 18 months ago. So we were grappling with all of this. I walked out of the session with Ben Zander. I rang my husband and I said, you know what, just let's start building that house. Let's build it. Let's move there and just see what happens. To his credit, he went, all right, let's do it. Now he's an engineer. So I had no plan for him. And he went, all right, let's do it. So then I started the process and I was really transparent with the team. I'm building this house. I'm moving to the Hunter Valley. How are you going to make it work, Ange? I have no idea, but I'm going to give it a go. So then the executive team, my managing director, I just got this job. And he was amazing. I said, Gavin, Mal and I are building a house in the Hunter Valley and we're leaving. And he said, but you've just got the job. Are you resigning? I know, I'm leaving Sydney, but I'm staying in this role. And he said, how's that going to happen? I said, I've got no idea. I said, but if your technologists can't actually make that work, then nobody's going to be able to make it work. And to his credit, he did not have any idea as I did how this was going to work. But he said, you know what, I trust that you'll make the call should you need to make the call if it's not working. And throughout that process, I never asked for permission because in myself, I just felt this was the decision for our family. This was the decision that was core to who I was. And no matter how this was going to play out, I would make the call if it wasn't going to be successful, either for me or for J&J. And clearly successful for both of us, considering I'm still the CIO and I still work for J&J and I still live in the Hunter Valley. So it was a bit of a leap of faith and it was scary and we had not all the answers. But I think, Nat, to bring it all back, I was very clear about the boundaries I was setting. I understood in myself how I worked and how I wanted to see this happen. I knew what the organization needed of me in that process of being available. And I also knew what was important, and it was all about my family. So they were the decisions we made. It was just, I still remember
Good on you.
I still remember the look on his face.
So, Angie, you've been so generous. I feel that we'll probably need to close soon. Maybe the second last question. You kindly accepted. I know that on your LinkedIn, your banner, you have a quote around how precious time is, and you kindly accepted to be one of our champions here. So, would you mind sharing your thoughts around why do you think the Mindful CIO community and movement are important, and why have you accepted to be our champion?
Sure. And you're exactly right. As leaders, I don't believe there's any greater gift. As people, there's no greater gift than our gift of our time, because it is, as we all know, something we can never get back. So you've got to make sure that the time that you give is aligned with your purpose and your own goals and the values which you would like your brand and yourself to be associated with. So for me, when we spoke about becoming a champion for the Mindful CIO movement, I really did go through the manifesto and I said, which one of these wouldn't I be a part of? And there's none, like every single one of them, even 2.0, right? I can see what's required. And I think about the roles that we play as technologists. If I just focus on that for the moment, we are in the most critical space where we have an opportunity to reach more people, provide more access, create an environment that supports our most vulnerable. And if we don't do that as tech savvy humanists, then I feel we're going to actually create a worse society, and we will not leave it with the legacy that we actually need to leave. And so for me, I find those spaces where I can elevate, amplify, and really look at that equitable access to technology, and those, groups like this, like the Mindful CIO, who actually champion it as being the places where I want to spend my time and where I want to help people spend their time. So that's why I decided to be a champion.
Thank you. And we even didn't get into diversity and inclusion and how that's important for you. And next time, once we get to the podcast, fingers crossed, you'll be one of our first yes, for sure, if you can make the time. And maybe final words or final thoughts, if anything, leadership lessons or whatever final words comes to your mind. You've been very generous with your time, so happy to close. It's time for you to go soon.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably had enough of me speaking now, but honestly, we all have the opportunity to be the leader that we aspire to be. We are, the boundaries that we put in place are the boundaries that we acknowledge or perceive. So for me, it is about, how would you like your legacy to be remembered? And as a leader, what does that look like? If someone were to say, what is it about Ange that, most excites me or inspires me, then I would like for it to play back how I would want it to play back. That she, supports others, that is committed to amplifying and advancing, women into senior leadership roles, is passionate about her team, is absolutely focused on the well-being and engagement and career advancement of talent. And so when I think about all of that, every single person actually on this call tonight has that exact same opportunity. We're all amazing people. You just have to lean into it and be focused.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ange. I can see some feedback from people already, in the chat. Certainly extremely inspiring conversation. Thanks so much for your generosity, for being so open as well. And I put you on spot a couple of times with unplanned questions. So thanks for, playing along. So thanks so much. And I know that you need to go soon if you have a call. Yeah, look forward to keep in touch. And it's such an honor to have you as our champion. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Enjoy. And please reach out on LinkedIn if you like. It'd be lovely to connect with you all.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.